Hello chess friends and welcome to your Out of Chess channel and welcome to the absolute stunner of the round 7 of the Tata Steel Rapid and Blitz Chess Tournament in 2024. We have here an amazing game between the leader Magnus Carlsen against the young talented player Vincent Keymer. So far Magnus Carlsen is in the lead. After the first 6 rounds, Magnus had half of the point more than Nodirbek Abdusattorov, but Nodirbek lost his game today against Wesley So, which gives here Magnus Carlsen an opportunity to maybe have a huge gap. Because if he wins now this game against Vincent Keymer, then he would be 1/2 point better than the competition, which would be then a huge result. And I think if this game he wins, nothing can stop him to win at least this rapid section of this amazing chess tournament. So let's see now what happened. Magnus Carlsen versus Vincent Keymer. The game finished a couple of minutes ago. Put your seatbelts on. Here we have an again immortal endgame pattern produced here by Magnus Carlsen. So with the white pieces, Magnus opened with the move d4. Vincent's response was knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to f3, the anti-ninja Indian setup, d5. The game transposes now into the 3 knights variation of the queen's gambit decline, and now after move c6 we have now the semi-Slav defense. Bishop to g5, knight from b to d7, e3, and now here Vincent plays one of my favorite openings against d4, the beautiful Cambridge Springs defense. If you're interested maybe into this defense, you can also check out a couple of my studies from Black's perspective. In my opinion, really good approach with the main strategic concept to hop with the knight here on e4 and put more pressure against this a little bit unpleasant knight here on c3. Magnus releases the pressure, plays now c takes d5, which becomes now the so-called Yugoslav variation of the Cambridge Springs defense. Knight to d5, the correct choice here by Vincent Keymer, putting more pressure against the knight on c3. Rook to c1, and now again a good choice by Vincent. Knight takes c3, b takes c3, and now you get an extra tempo with bishop to a3. Black gets out now in the out of the opening in a good way and has now this opportunity to break and enter with the move c5, or later this move e5 could have been also prepared, but c5 perfectly fine here by Vincent Keymer. You can also play a different move, or you can play the standard h6 and then c5, but c5, although it's a theoretical novelty, this move you will probably play in the next couple of moves, because you don't want to tolerate, of course, such a dominant center position here of white's pawn. So that's why c5, releasing the pressure in the center, is a good choice again here by Vincent Keymer. So I think he has equalized the game. He has good opportunities now with the black pieces. Magnus goes with bishop to d3, c takes d4, and after e takes d4, what Vincent Keymer accomplished here is, of course, now a slightly disadvantage, a tiny little positional problem for white. This is now, of course, the backward pawn on c3. We have now the move b6. Vincent is, of course, trying to improve the position of the light square bishop. Bishop to e4, and now after rook to b8 and bishop to f4, Vincent plays now the correct bishop to b7, and here he has really equalized the game. It seems to me here in this game that he's really well prepared in the Cambridge Springs defense. He knows his theory, because bishop to b7 he played really in a fast way. There's nothing that can be done. At least you cannot win the rook. Bishop to b8 seems tempting, but then bishop to e4 comes with the tempo here against the rook, and also the bishop is hanging, so here black would be even slightly better. So this is not working. So after bishop to b7, that's why queen to e2. Magnus connects now the queen to the bishop. Vincent plays bishop to a6, again the correct move, hitting now the queen. We have now bishop to d3, bishop takes, queen takes d3, and now rook to c8. Really solid opening setup now for black. Black doesn't have any strategic problems, has to only now secure the king by castling, and white has now something to worry about this backward pawn on c3. We have now castling, and now c4. Magnus improves now, of course, his strategic disadvantage. Bishop to e7, good move again by Vincent, trying, of course, to search for new opportunities for the dark square bishop. h4 by Magnus. He goes into the attack. He says, I hold here the position. The c4 d4 setup, this is now the so-called hanging pawn structure, gives here white some spaces in the center of the board, also restricts any minor piece activity of blacks. So that's why when the center is a little bit close, is a little bit immobile, I think the flank attack makes perfect sense here by Magnus Carlsen. Vincent again plays the correct choice, rook from f to d8. First of all, he's threatening something around this on this d file. If something clears, of course, the queen could be endangered on d3. Rook to b1, queen to h5. Again, a good move, I would say, by Vincent, bringing the queen into the defense. Rook to b5, queen to g6, and now queen to e2. Magnus keeps now the queen on the board. He's trying to do something, especially with the move h5. Vincent goes with h6. We have now a4, queen to g4, sort of a pin here. It's not, of course, a dangerous pin, but again, what Vincent is trying to do, if the knight moves maybe somewhere, then he could release again the pressure in the game by trading off the queens, by simplifying the game till the end. We have now g3, a6, rook to b2, and now comes the first, maybe a little critical moment of the game. Here Vincent plays a tiny little dubious bishop to h4. Unnecessary move, seems tempting, and it's not like white is winning now the game or something because of this move. Still the position is about equal, but it was a risky choice because Magnus found here really great counterattack. Here g5 is actually the best move for black, immediately attacking this bishop, kicking it away from the square f4, and now you can play king to g7. If something gets endangered on the h file, you can always bring the rook here. You can maybe even try yourself here some kind of an attack on the h file. I think this would be a perfect then setup here for black. Bishop to h4, a little bit risky because Magnus has now this idea, a5, although maybe the best choice here for Magnus would have been also to play knight to h4, queen to e2, rook to e2, and then you can play g5. And after something like d5, the position would be very I think simplified. Maybe slightly better, slightly easier to play for white, but again, the engine evaluates this position as equal for both sides. So that's why Magnus tried to spice up the game somehow, plays now the aggressive a5. The point about this move a5 is after b takes a5 that he created now himself here a beautiful passer on the c file. We have now c5 by Magnus immediately, bishop to g5. Vincent retreats now with the bishop. Magnus advances the pawn, bishop to f4, c takes d7, rook takes c2. This is a very forced line, and after rook to c2, here Vincent plays, I think, the correct choice. He plays now the ultra aggressive bishop takes g3, and this move is the only move that of course helps out now black in the continuation of the game, because the huge threat was of course, if you retreat, then white would continue with rook to c8, and there could be a promotion on d8. Bishop to g3 is a great move here by Vincent because if f takes g3 and queen takes g3, the position is equal. The engine says this is an equal game, but just if white plays now the correct move, because okay, black lost the minor piece, but look at this, 4 pawns are storming here on the king side. This is also pass pawn, at least one pass pawn. It's a double pass pawn, but we can count it really as one dangerous pass pawn here on the a file. So Vincent has now, I think, a great compensation for the lost minor piece. In order to stay in the game, Magnus has to find really the optimal choice, and believe me or not, Magnus found it, which is really crazy. After move king to f1 and rook to d7, Magnus found the beautiful rook to c8. This is the way they go, and after queen to e4, only move in order to survive somehow in this game, because Vincent has to now cover with queen to g6. But now after queen takes g6, you cannot pick up the queen with the king because you get knight to e5, the fork against the rook and the king. So that's why after queen to g6 and f takes g6, that had to be played now by Vincent Keymer. Magnus accomplished something. Now these pawns are not so dangerous like maybe the situation where the pawn would have been on f7. If maybe 3 really pawns are storming here, then it's really unpleasant game. So Magnus has now the only pawn on d4. The knight is supporting so far here the pawn, and the rook's activity is of course really good because the rook can go behind and attack now also the pawns on the a file. So the only move here Magnus Carlsen found in order to stay in the game. Of course, king to e2. Magnus is getting closer with the king. g5 by Vincent. He's trying to play g4, deflect the knight from the defense of the pawn. Magnus advances the king, and now comes, I would say, a tiny little, again, critical moment of the game. Here, Vincent had an opportunity to cement the position. What I mean about the cement position, to somehow create really a completely drawish opportunity with the move a4. If he would have played a4, Magnus would probably go with rook to c6, then you advance the pawn, but now you go like this, rook to f7, and even if white picks up now the pawn, you play rook to f5, and this is now completely drawish position because you're holding the potential d5 move. You're not allowing this pawn to be advanced, and this is now completely drawish setup now here for black. This was the way to go, somehow keeping the d-file square locked. But what Vincent did, and he's still in the game, I'm not saying this is a mistake or something that he does, he plays rook to d6, but now the game is more complicated to play because Magnus advances the knight here, of course, on e5. We have a4, king to e4. Now Magnus centralizes the pieces, the rook is active anyway, so Magnus created really the maximum potential activity of all of the pieces that he still has on the board. He doesn't have so many pieces, but at least the pieces have gained really the maximum activity. Vincent advances the pawn here, rook to c4 by Magnus, and now rook to a6, rook takes. We have now king to g8. Vincent is trying to bring the king also into the game. Knight to d3 by Magnus, he's trying to hit the rook. King to f7, and after knight to c5, now comes the really huge critical moment of the game. Here Vincent makes a huge blunder with rook to a8, and this is not good because what you're supposed to do is to bring the rook somehow behind your enemy's pieces. You have to play rook to b6. You have to now give up the pawn here, and then you advance maybe this one. Probably white would go, of course, with the king on e5, but now you go behind. Still white is better, but at least you're doing something. At least you can deliver some checks. I don't want to dive too deep now into this line because many things really can happen, but the main strategic goal in this endgame is to bring the rook behind where you have at least some kind of an activity. Vincent stayed passive with this rook on a8, and Magnus simply improves the position of the king. g4, knight to e6. Look at this, the position is slowly but surely collapsing here for Vincent Keymer. The evaluation is about +3 in white's favor, which is really crazy, although black has many pawns on the board. They're immobile, sort of. White's activity is really huge. Knight centralized, king centralized. The pawn is finally rolling on the d-file. Really an unpleasant game now for Vincent Keymer. d5, g3, Magnus goes behind. h4, d6, simply pushing the pawn further. g2, and now Magnus, after knight to g5 and king to f8 here by Vincent, plays also a mistake in the continuation of the game. His first really mistake, he played now rook to g1. This is still, I would say, a winning maybe position for white, but much harder to perform. A better choice was to play rook to c1, then you allow maybe king to e8, but now again you go with your king closer, and if something like this happens, then you play rook to g1 when the king is more active. So first you can activate your piece, and then you go with the rook on g1. But after rook to g1, Vincent had maybe an opportunity with rook to e8, then after something like king to d5, again to bring somehow the rook into activity. But Vincent played now another blunder with move h3, although as I said, even after rook to e8, white should be much better because of the previous blunder by Vincent Keymer with rook to e8. Again, Vincent is not activating his rook, and now Magnus just grabs the pawn. We have now a4, rook to g2, a3, rook to f2, first a check, knight to king to e6, and after rook to a6, here Magnus Carlsen played a beautiful winning idea. Maybe if you like, pause the video and try to see now the winning idea here for white. White moves and wins the game. After this move, Vincent Keymer immediately resigned. It's a brilliant endgame idea here by Magnus Carlsen. So what would you do now in this particular position? Okay, here Magnus plays the correct, of course, knight to g5, and in this position Vincent Keymer resigned. What's the issue? You can push the pawn, that's not the problem, but now there is a huge problem after rook to h2 and rook to h8 checkmate, because the knight is controlling also the square. The king is very well placed, and you could also here sacrifice maybe the rook for the pawn, but white can simply take. King takes d6, and even if you try a2, still rook to h8 is a checkmate, because although the king is not holding anymore the f7 square, now the knight is holding the square, and it would be an incredible checkmate. Maybe for the beauty of the game, Vincent should have gone till the end, but knight to g5, really brilliant idea, and Magnus Carlsen won his game. Really tough game against Vincent Keymer. So with this win, Magnus is really taking off here. He's having now 1.5 point more than the competition. He's playing really like a machine. 5 wins and 2 draws out of the first 7 games that he played. Really, this is the Magnus that we used to know. Still, of course, the best chess player in the world. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas here of the Cambridge Springs defense. If you want to see some other beautiful games that we have covered in this event, check out our coverage. Here are some games that we have analyzed before, and if you like this content, hit the subscribe button. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say in the end? Chess is the best, of course.